6 months after the first alien ships appeared in Earth's sky, representatives from both sides met in Geneva to negotiate the terms of peace. The room was tense. On one side sat human delegates from every major nation. On the other, Vraltesh officers who had survived the war. Between them sat Yunji, chosen to mediate because she had maintained communication with both sides throughout the conflict. The negotiations were difficult. The humans demanded accountability. The Vraltesh Empire had to dismantle its slave holdings across the galaxy. Every conquered world would be given the choice to join a new galactic federation as equals or remain independent. War crimes tribunals would be established. Reparations would be paid. Thexler, stripped of his command but present as a witness, listened to the demands with something like relief. "We accept," he said simply. "We came as conquerors and learned we were not invincible. It is a lesson we needed, though the cost was terrible." "Why?" Minho asked from his seat among the human delegates. "Why did you do it? Why conquer 847 worlds?" "Because we could," Thexila replied. "Because no one ever stopped us. Because we believed it was our right. We were wrong. You showed us that." The peace treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The Vraltesh fleet prepared to leave Earth's system, but not before one final revelation that would change the galaxy forever. Day One had spent months analyzing all the data Earth had captured from the alien fleet. Now he stood before the United Nations Assembly with a presentation that made the entire room fall silent. On the screen behind him appeared a galactic classification system used by the Vraltesh to rate planetary danger levels. According to their scale, Day One explained, planets are rated from Class 1, which are garden worlds with minimal threats, to Class 12, which are death worlds where survival requires constant struggle. Most inhabited planets in the galaxy are Class 2 or 3. The Vraltesh homeworld is Class 1. He paused for effect. Earth is classified as Class 12, the highest rating possible. There are only 14 other Class 12 worlds in the known galaxy, and none of them have intelligent life. We are the only species in galactic history to evolve on a death world and achieve spaceflight. The implications were staggering. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy came from easy worlds. They had never faced the evolutionary pressures that shaped humanity. They had never needed to develop the persistence, the adaptability, the sheer stubborn refusal to quit that defined human nature. "We are unique," Day One continued, "not because we are better than other species, but because our world was harder. We learned to survive in conditions that would kill anyone else. That is why we won." G1 stood next to him and added her own findings. "Human biology is an anomaly. Our endurance capacity is unmatched. Our pain tolerance is extreme. Our ability to function under stress is extraordinary. We can survive injuries that would be instantly fatal to most species. We can adapt to environments that others find lethal. Earth spent millions of years forging us into the ultimate survivors." The presentation was broadcast to the departing Vraltesh fleet and beyond, to the wider galaxy. Within days, Earth's reputation spread. The planet that defeated the invincible empire. The death world that bred the galaxy's most dangerous species. Yuna, the journalist who had documented the war from the beginning, interviewed a Vraltesh soldier named Marketh before he departed Earth. The interview would become one of the most watched programs in human history. "What will you tell your people about Earth?" Yuna asked. Marketh thought carefully before answering. "I will tell them that we faced a species that should not exist. Your oceans have creatures with tentacles as long as buildings and teeth like swords. Your forests have invisible predators and poisonous everything. Your deserts kill with heat. Your poles kill with cold. Your weather produces storms that devastate entire regions. Your insects carry diseases. Your microscopic life is deadly. And in the middle of all that, humans evolved. You learned not just to survive, but to thrive. You domesticated the wolves that hunted you. You turned the plants that poisoned you into medicine. You built cities in every climate. You conquered your own world before we ever arrived. We never had a chance. Do you hate us?" Yuna asked quietly. "No," Marketh said. "I fear you. I respect you. But I do not hate you. You only did what any species would do. You defended your home. I hope someday we can meet again as friends rather than enemies." Minho led the first humanitarian mission to a world the Vraltesh had conquered decades earlier. The inhabitants, a species of peaceful herbivores, were terrified when the human ships arrived. They had heard the stories. They expected Earth soldiers to be monsters. Instead, Minho and his team brought food, medicine, and engineers to help rebuild. They worked alongside the local population, teaching them defensive tactics, sharing technology, offering friendship. Slowly, the fear faded. These humans were fierce, yes, but they were not cruel. You defeated those who enslaved us, one of the locals said to Minho through a translator. But you did not replace them as our masters. Why? Because we know what it is like to be threatened, Minho replied. We know what it feels like to face extinction. We would not inflict that on others. Back on Earth, the captured alien technology was being studied and adapted. Borum and Taman worked together to design Earth's first true interstellar ships. Within a year, humanity would have vessels capable of traveling to other star systems. The age of human space exploration was beginning. Jiyon and Jiwon collaborated on a book titled The Human Advantage, Biology of a Death World Species. It became required. Reading at universities across the galaxy, other species studied it to understand how evolution on a harsh world created such resilient people. Some even began selective breeding programs to try to develop similar traits, though it would take thousands of generations to see results. Thexler requested one final meeting before he returned to his homeworld to face judgment. Minho agreed to meet him, curious what the alien commander wanted to say. They met in a neutral location, a small room with guards outside. Thexler looked older somehow, tired and worn. I wanted to apologize, he said simply. Not just as a military commander, but as one individual to another. I led my people into a war we could not win because I was arrogant. Thousands died because of my pride. I am sorry. Minho considered the alien for a long moment. We have a saying on Earth. To err is human, to forgive divine, but I am not divine. I am just a soldier who saw too many of my people die. Your apology does not bring them back. I know, Thexler said quietly. However, Minho continued, you are learning. That is more than most conquerors ever do. Perhaps someday your people and mine can build something better than what existed before. But it will take time. A lot of time. I understand. Thank you for meeting with me. As Thexler left, Minho felt a strange emotion. Not quite forgiveness, but not hatred either. Perhaps it was understanding. The alien had learned a hard lesson about hubris and the dangers of underestimating others. Maybe that was enough. 10 years later, Earth had changed completely. The United Nations had evolved into the United Earth Government, speaking for all of humanity in galactic affairs. Yunji served as Earth's first ambassador to the new Galactic Federation, a coalition of free worlds that had replaced the Vraltesh Empire's forced conquests. At the Federation's first assembly, she stood before representatives of 800 different species and gave a speech that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day, she said, her voice clear and strong. We survived ice ages and plagues. We faced predators that made us prey. We endured disasters that wiped out 90% of all life, and we did not just survive. We thrived, we built. We created. We reached for the stars. She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. We know what it means to struggle. We know what it means to face impossible odds. And because of that, we understand suffering. We will never use our strength to conquer others. Instead, we offer it in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. We offer it in friendship to those who seek peace. And we offer it as a warning to those who would threaten the innocent. Earth and humanity stand ready to take our place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as partners, as friends, and as the guardians we wish we had when the Vraltesh came to our world. The assembly erupted in applause. Not everyone trusted humans yet. Not everyone was comfortable with the species from the death world, but everyone respected them. Everyone knew what happened to those who underestimated Earth. In the years that followed, humans spread across the galaxy. Some became explorers, mapping unknown regions. Others became traders, their adaptability making them excellent merchants. Many joined the Federation's defense forces, their combat skills and persistence making them elite soldiers. Young Su returned to ecological work, now studying alien ecosystems across the galaxy. Hana used her drone expertise to develop new technologies for search and rescue. Sun Wu wrote best-selling books about galactic cultures. Ji Wu designed buildings on a dozen worlds. And throughout the galaxy, whenever young aliens were told bedtime stories, a new tale had entered the rotation. 3 months into the war, the balance had shifted. The Vraltesh were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. Taman's squadron had grown from 12 pilots to over 100. Earth's nations had pooled their resources, converting civilian spacecraft into weapons of war. The ships were crude, patched together with salvage technology and human ingenuity, but they were effective. Borum had continued to refine her orbital debris tactics. Now, instead of just old satellites, they were using everything: spent rocket stages, disabled space stations, even frozen bags of garbage from the International Space Station. Anything that could be accelerated to lethal velocity became a weapon. "This is undignified," one of the new pilots complained. "We are fighting with trash," Taman grinned. "Yes, and we are winning with trash. That should tell you something about us." They attacked the alien fleet in waves using tactics that no formal military would ever approve. Kamikaze runs, suicide charges, insane maneuvers that risked death with every second. The aliens had better ships, better weapons, better shields, but they fought like they expected to survive. Humans fought like they had already accepted death and decided to take as many enemies with them as possible. 2 more Vraltesh capital ships were damaged. One was destroyed when a converted mining vessel, its holds filled with explosives, rammed it at full speed. The pilot, a woman named Subin Huang, transmitted one final message before impact. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone who ever fought impossible odds. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. On the alien homeworld, billions of light years away, the news from Earth was causing panic. The Vraltesh had always told themselves they were invincible. Their empire had never lost a war. Every conquest had been successful. The idea that they could be defeated was simply not part of their culture. Now videos from Earth were being broadcast on their news networks. Footage of their soldiers retreating, images of their ships damaged or destroyed, reports of entire units wiped out by disease or wildlife. The proud Vraltesh people watched in horror as their invincible military was humbled by primitives. Political pressure mounted on the military command. Protests erupted in the streets of the homeworld's cities. Parents demanded to know why their children were dying on some distant planet that was not worth the cost. The Emperor himself called for answers. Thexler received the summons to return home and explain his failure. It was the worst moment of his life. He had been so confident, so certain. Now he would face disgrace and possibly execution for his incompetence. Before he left, he made one final decision. A massive assault on Berlin. If he could break the humans there, perhaps he could salvage something from this disaster. Berlin had become the symbol of human resistance. The city had been fought over before in earlier human wars, and its people knew what occupation meant. They had prepared better than any other city on Earth. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a kill zone. Every citizen was ready to fight. Ji Wu Quan had spent weeks preparing his defenses. As an architect, he knew the city's bones, its hidden spaces, its structural weaknesses. He had turned that knowledge into a weapon. Buildings were rigged to collapse at strategic moments. Underground tunnels became ambush routes. Ancient bunkers from World War II were reopened and armed. When the Vraltesh attacked with 10,000 troops, they entered a nightmare. Hana Lim coordinated the drone swarms from a hidden command center. Thousands of commercial drones, each carrying small explosive charges, swarmed the alien formation. Individually, they were harmless. Together, they were devastating. The aliens' point defense systems could not track so many small, fast-moving targets. The drones struck like angry wasps, finding gaps in armor, targeting sensors and communications equipment. The battle lasted 48 hours, building to building, room to room. The aliens had better weapons and armor. The humans had desperation and knowledge of every hiding spot, every angle of fire, every escape route. In one building, Minji Baek led a team that held off 200 alien soldiers for 6 hours. She had been a competitive mountaineer before the war, her body trained for endurance. While other fighters tired and fell back, she kept going, kept fighting, kept killing. When the aliens finally breached the building, they found her alone, surrounded by empty ammunition magazines and alien corpses, still firing her weapon with grim determination. They shot her 3 times before she finally fell, but even wounded, she managed to detonate the explosives she had planted throughout the building. The structure collapsed, killing everyone inside. Human and alien alike, her final words, transmitted to command before the explosion, were simple. "Tell my mother I did not quit." When the Battle of Berlin finally ended, the Vraltesh had lost almost 8,000 soldiers. The humans had lost twice as many, but they had won. The aliens retreated, Their morale shattered, their confidence broken. News of the victory spread across the globe. Berlin became a rallying cry. If they could win there, they could win anywhere. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with the captured Vraltesh prisoners. Sunwoo Choi, a cultural anthropologist, had been interviewing them extensively. He discovered something fascinating. The aliens were not monsters. They were not evil. They were just following the only culture they had ever known: conquest. "We are taught from birth that we are superior," one prisoner explained through the translator, "that it is our destiny to rule, that other species exist to serve us. It never occurred to us to question these beliefs." Sunwoo began showing the prisoners human culture, music, art, literature, films. He showed them stories about other humans, about conflicts and resolutions, about hope and redemption. The aliens were fascinated. Their own culture was rigid and militaristic. Human culture was chaotic and creative and endlessly diverse. "You have been imagining wars like this for generations," the prisoner said, watching a human film about alien invasion. "You have been preparing psychologically for this moment for hundreds of years. Even your entertainment is about fighting impossible enemies and winning." "We call it science fiction," Sunwoo explained. "We imagine futures, both good and bad. We prepare for possibilities. It is how we think." The prisoner was silent for a long time. Then it said something that Sunwoo would never forget. "We never imagined losing. That was our greatest weakness. We never even considered the possibility." Jiwon published her research paper on human biology, and it sent shockwaves through the scientific community, both human and alien. She had documented exactly why humans were so difficult to kill: the adrenaline response that let humans ignore wounds, the endurance capacity that let them keep fighting long after they should have collapsed, the ability to function on minimal sleep and food for days. "Humans are not the strongest species," she wrote, "nor the fastest, nor the smartest. But we are the most stubborn. Our bodies evolved to keep going when any rational being would quit. We are biologically optimized for survival against impossible odds." Copies of her paper reached the Vraltesh fleet. The alien soldiers read it with growing horror. They were fighting a species that evolution had specifically designed to never give up. No wonder they were losing. Yoonji had evolved from a diplomat into a coordinator of global resistance. She worked 20-hour days, managing communications between dozens of nations, making sure resources went where they were needed most, keeping humanity unified. It was exhausting work, but she never complained. One night, working late in her office, she received a communication request from the alien fleet. It was Thexler himself, the alien commander. She accepted the call, curious what he could possibly want. The alien appeared on her screen looking tired and defeated. "I am Thexler," he said, "commander of the invasion force. I wish to discuss terms." "Terms?" Yoonji could not keep the surprise from her voice. "Terms of our withdrawal," Thexler continued. "We cannot win this war. I know that now. Perhaps I knew it weeks ago but was too proud to admit it. Your species is unlike anything we have ever encountered. We came as conquerors and found ourselves fighting for survival. This cannot continue." Yoonji felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Relief, triumph, and strangely, pity for this alien who had learned humility the hardest way possible. "I will convey your request to my superiors," she said carefully. "But understand this. We will not simply let you leave. You came to enslave us. Millions have died. You will answer for that." "I understand," Thexler said quietly. "I deserve whatever punishment your people decide. I only ask that the suffering stop, please." After the call ended, Yoonji sat in silence for a long time. They had done it. Against all odds, against a foe with vastly superior technology, humanity had won, not through strength, not through better weapons, but through sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. She thought about all the people who had died. The soldiers, the civilians, the heroes whose names would be remembered forever, and the countless others whose sacrifices would be forgotten by history. They had paid such a terrible price, but they had won. Minho received the news while coordinating with units in Southeast Asia. The aliens wanted to negotiate surrender. He felt no joy, only exhaustion and a deep sadness for all that had been lost. War did not have winners, only survivors. 3 weeks into the war, Thexler made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered a major ground offensive in the Amazon rainforest. His logic was sound. The humans were using their knowledge of their own planet against his forces, but the rainforest was neutral territory. Neither side had a significant presence there. If his forces could establish a forward base deep in the Amazon, they could strike at South American cities from behind. Young-Soo Bei had been living in the Amazon for 5 years, studying the ecosystem as an ecologist. When the war started, he offered his services to the Brazilian military. They accepted immediately. No one knew the rainforest like he did. No one understood its secrets, its dangers, its beauty. When the alien dropships descended into the jungle, Young-Soo was waiting. So was the rainforest itself. The Vreltesh soldiers emerged from their ships into a wall of heat and humidity. Their environmental suits immediately began to struggle. The moisture in the air interfered with their sensors. The dense canopy above blocked their communications with their orbiting ships, and the sounds of the jungle, the constant noise of life in every direction, masked the approach of human guerrilla fighters. "This environment is unsuitable for operations," reported the alien commander. "Visibility is minimal. Equipment is malfunctioning. Request permission to relocate." "Permission denied," came the response from Thexeler. "Establish the base." "That is an order." The aliens began to set up their equipment, cutting down trees to create a clearing. That was their first mistake. The trees in the Amazon were home to countless species, and many of them were not happy about losing their homes. Bullet ants, each sting feeling like being shot, swarmed over the soldiers. Their suits protected them from the stings, but the sheer number of insects was overwhelming. Then came the poison dart frogs, bright blue and yellow, beautiful to look at, deadly to touch. The Vreltesh had no way of knowing that these tiny creatures carried enough toxin to kill dozens of their kind. When soldiers began handling the local wildlife out of curiosity, the results were fatal. Young-Soo and his guerrilla team watched from the trees, not even needing to fire a shot. The jungle was doing their work for them. "Should we attack?" one of the fighters whispered. "Not yet," Young-Soo replied. "Let them get weaker first. Let the Amazon teach them respect." By the third day, the Vreltesh base was in chaos. Soldiers were falling sick from diseases they had no immunity to. Fungal infections were spreading through their equipment, breaking down the seals of their suits. Jaguars had attacked the perimeter 3 times, dragging away sentries. And the heat, the endless, suffocating heat, was breaking their morale. The commander sent another message. "We have lost 40% of our forces to disease and wildlife. The jungle is actively hostile. This position is not sustainable." Back on the flagship, Thexeler stared at the message in disbelief. His elite soldiers were being defeated by a forest, by animals and insects. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was terrifying. While the Amazon offensive was falling apart, Daewon had been working on a new strategy. He called it psychological warfare, though the military commanders called it being creepy as hell. His team began broadcasting messages to the alien fleet, messages designed to erode their morale and fill them with fear. The first broadcast showed footage of human soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that would have killed any Vreltesh. A man with a broken leg running on adrenaline. A woman with burns across her arms still firing her weapon. Humans ignoring pain that should have incapacitated them. The second broadcast was worse. It showed Earth's extinct predators, dinosaurs, saber-toothed cats, terror birds, giant crocodiles. The message was clear. This is what Earth produces. These are our ancestors' neighbors. This is what we learned to survive against. The third broadcast was the most disturbing. It explained endurance hunting. How ancient humans would chase prey for days, never stopping, never resting until the animal died of exhaustion. The video showed humans running marathons, pushing their bodies far beyond what seemed physically possible. "We are persistence hunters," the broadcast explained. "We do not give up. We do not stop. We will chase you across the galaxy if we must, and eventually, we will catch you." The broadcasts were having an effect. Alien soldiers began to have nightmares about humans. They jumped at shadows. They saw threats everywhere. The psychological pressure was as effective as any weapon. Ji-Yeon Park was working in a biosafety level 4 laboratory, studying samples of alien tissue taken from captured soldiers. What she discovered changed everything. The Vreltesh had incredible technology, but their biology was surprisingly fragile. They had evolved in a nearly sterile environment. Their immune systems were not prepared for Earth's microbial diversity. "They're dying from the common cold," she reported to the Defense Council, her voice filled with disbelief. Literal common cold viruses are killing them. Their bodies have no defense. Within days, biological warfare protocols were established, but not in the way anyone expected. The humans did not weaponize deadly diseases. They did not need to. Simply exposing the aliens to Earth's normal, everyday bacteria and viruses was enough. The planet itself was the weapon. Vraltesh soldiers began falling sick in larger numbers. Their medical facilities were overwhelmed. No matter how carefully they sealed their suits, no matter how many precautions they took, Earth's microscopic life found a way in. It was in the air. It was in the water. It was everywhere. Thexler received a report from his chief medical officer that made his blood run cold. "Commander, we are facing a pandemic. Earth's pathogens are spreading through our forces faster than we can treat them. We need to evacuate all ground troops immediately." "We cannot show such weakness," Thexler replied, but his voice lacked conviction. In the deep ocean, another disaster was unfolding. A Vraltesh submarine expedition had been sent to explore Earth's seas, looking for resources and potential base locations. Jung Ho-yoon, a marine biologist who had served in the Korean Navy's Special Forces, had other plans. The aliens descended into the darkness of the ocean depths, their submarines built to withstand the crushing pressure. What they were not built to withstand was Jung-ho's sabotage. He had infiltrated one of their surface support vessels and planted malware in their navigation systems. The submarines went deeper than intended. Far deeper, into the abyssal zone, where the pressure could crush steel, and the creatures that lived there were like nightmares made flesh. Giant squids attacked the submarines, their tentacles wrapping around the hulls. Anglerfish, massive and terrifying, investigated the strange lights, and when one submarine's hull finally cracked under the pressure, the implosion was instantaneous. Only 2 submarines made it back to the surface. The survivors refused to speak about what they had seen in the deep. They simply stared into space, their minds broken by the experience. Minho had spent the last 3 weeks coordinating attacks on alien supply lines. His special forces had become experts at hit-and-run tactics. They would strike hard, cause maximum damage, and disappear before the aliens could respond. It was exhausting work, but it was effective. During one raid, his team captured several alien soldiers. Minho sat across from one of the prisoners, studying the creature through the glass of the containment cell. The alien looked back at him with 4 eyes filled with something Minho recognized: fear. "We need to understand each other," Minho said through the translator device. "Why are you here? What do you want from Earth?" The alien was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke. Its voice filtered through the translator into Korean. "We came to conquer. That is what we do. We have conquered 847 worlds. Why? Because we can. Because it is our nature. Because no one has ever stopped us before." Minho leaned forward. "Let me tell you about our nature. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages, plagues, predators, volcanoes, floods. For millions of years, Earth threw everything it had at us. And we survived. We thrived. We became the dominant species on this planet not because we were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. We dominated because we refused to quit. Ever. The aliens seemed to consider this. You are saying we made a mistake coming here?" "No," Minho said with a cold smile. "You made the worst mistake of your entire empire's history. You picked a fight with persistence hunters, and now we will never stop hunting you until you leave our world." The prisoner's eyes widened with understanding and terror. Across the globe, the pattern was repeating. Every battle, every skirmish, every encounter was teaching the same lesson. Earth was not like other worlds. Humans were not like other species. The Vraltesh had conquered hundreds of civilizations, but they had never faced anything like this. In his command center, Thexler reviewed the casualty reports. Thousands dead, tens of thousands wounded or sick, equipment losses mounting, morale collapsing, and the humans showed no signs of surrendering. If anything, they were getting stronger, learning from each battle, adapting to alien tactics faster than should be possible. "We cannot win this," his second-in-command said quietly, "not without destroying the planet entirely, and even then I am not sure we would survive the attempt." The battle for Tokyo lasted 18 hours. Yunahan crouched behind an overturned vehicle, her camera capturing every moment of the chaos. The Vraltesh soldiers moved through the streets with mechanical precision, their weapons firing bolts of energy that melted concrete and steel. But the Japanese self-defense forces had prepared well. They knew the city like the back of their hands, turning every building into a fortress and every street into a trap. What surprised everyone, including the humans themselves, was how quickly they adapted. The alien weapons were powerful but slow to recharge. Human soldiers learned to count the seconds between shots, then rush forward. During the brief window of vulnerability, it was dangerous. Many died, but many more succeeded. A Vraltesh commander sent a message back to his ship. These humans fight without logic. They charge weapons that should terrify them. They sacrifice themselves to save others. Their tactics make no sense, yet they are effective. Request additional support. Thexelor read the message with growing frustration. Additional support. In 18 hours of combat, they had requested more troops than they had needed for the entire conquest of 3 previous worlds. What was wrong with these primitives? In Seoul, Minho's unit had spent the night fighting a running battle through the subway system. The aliens had pursued them underground, thinking they had the humans trapped. Instead, Jae-hyun Kang, the unit's combat engineer, had turned the tunnels into a nightmare. Explosive charges were hidden in the walls. Support beams were rigged to collapse at the press of a button. Water mains were ready to burst and flood entire sections. Now, Minho said quietly into his radio. The explosions shook the ground above. Entire sections of the subway collapsed, burying dozens of alien soldiers under tons of concrete and steel. The survivors retreated to the surface, their morale shaken. They had never faced an enemy that would destroy their own infrastructure just to win a battle. Surinam, the unit's medic, worked frantically to treat the wounded. She had seen terrible injuries during her years of service, but nothing like this. Burns from alien energy weapons, wounds that seemed to cook flesh from the inside out. Yet the soldiers kept fighting. Even those with serious injuries refused to be evacuated until the battle was won. "You're insane, all of you," she muttered as she bandaged a soldier who had a broken arm and burns across half his body. "You need a hospital, not another gun." The soldier just grinned at her. "The aliens need to learn something about us. We don't quit." Halfway across the world in the Australian outback, a different kind of battle was taking place. A Vraltesh reconnaissance team had landed far from any city, thinking they would have an easy time surveying the terrain. Hyun Woo-song, a survival guide who knew the outback better than anyone, watched them from a distance with a grim smile. "Welcome to Australia, boys," he said softly. "Hope you brought anti-venom." The aliens had environmental suits that protected them from radiation, extreme temperatures, and toxic atmospheres. But they were not prepared for Earth's wildlife. Within an hour, 3 soldiers had been bitten by snakes. 2 more had disturbed a nest of funnel web spiders. One had the misfortune of stepping into shallow water where a saltwater crocodile was waiting. Their medic tried desperately to treat the injuries. But Vraltesh biology had no defense against Earth's evolved toxins. The venoms that had been refined over millions of years to kill Earth's creatures worked even better on aliens. By nightfall, half the reconnaissance team was dead. The survivors sent a frantic message to their ship. "This planet is hostile. Not just the intelligent species. Everything is hostile. The insects, the reptiles, even the plants have thorns that pierce our suits. Request immediate extraction." Thexler read the message 3 times, not quite believing what he was seeing. His soldiers were being killed by animals? By insects? The Empire had conquered worlds with predators the size of buildings. How could simple Earth creatures be a threat? But the reports kept coming in. In the Amazon rainforest, another team had been overwhelmed by a combination of jaguar attacks, poisonous frogs, and aggressive ants that seemed to coordinate their assault. In Africa, soldiers had encountered elephants and learned that Earth's large herbivores were not gentle. In the ocean, a submarine expedition had been attacked by creatures the aliens could not even identify. Things with tentacles and teeth that came from the darkness of the deep water. Jiwon was collecting all of this data, building a picture that both excited and terrified her. Earth was not just a planet with intelligent life. It was a weapon. Every ecosystem, every climate zone, every biome was a death trap for species that had evolved in gentler environments. The Vraltesh had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never conquered a world like this. She presented her findings to the Defense Council. The aliens are biologically unprepared for Earth. Their homeworld has mild weather, limited biodiversity, and relatively few toxins in their food chain. They evolved in an easy environment. We evolved in hell. Day 1 had been working on a parallel track analyzing the psychological profiles of the Vraltesh soldiers from intercepted communications. What he found was fascinating. The aliens had a concept of honor, of military duty, of following orders, but they did not have humanity's stubbornness. When faced with impossible odds, they retreated. When casualties mounted beyond acceptable levels, they withdrew. The idea of fighting to the last man was completely foreign to them. They're conquerors, not warriors, he explained to the military commanders. They win through overwhelming force and quick victories. They have never had to fight a long, grinding war. They don't know how. Yunji was slowly coming to terms with the reality of the situation. There would be no peaceful negotiation, no diplomatic solution. The Vraltesh had come to conquer, and they would only stop when they were beaten. It was a hard truth for someone who had spent her life believing in the power of words. But she was learning to accept it. She began working with the Defense Council to coordinate resistance efforts worldwide. Every nation was sharing intelligence, weapons, and tactics. Old enemies were working together. For the first time in human history, the entire species was truly united behind a single cause: survival. In space, things were going no better for the Vraltesh. Tae-min-oh, a fighter pilot with more courage than sense, had volunteered to lead a desperate mission. Earth's space forces were laughably primitive compared to the alien fleet. But Borum Shin, an aerospace engineer, had come up with a crazy idea. "We can't beat them with weapons," she had explained, "but we can beat them with garbage." Earth had been launching satellites for over a century. Many of them were now defunct, floating debris in orbit around the planet. Borum's plan was to weaponize this debris, using small thruster packages to turn old satellites into kinetic missiles. It was crude, it was desperate, but it might work. Taemin and his squadron flew modified civilian spacecraft, each one carrying a payload of remote-controlled debris. They approached the alien fleet at high speed, released their payloads, and veered away. The Vraltesh point defense systems activated, destroying many of the debris chunks, but not all of them. A defunct weather satellite, traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour, struck one of the alien warships. The impact was catastrophic. The satellite vaporized, but the energy released was enormous. The warship's shields flickered and failed. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull, confirmed hit. Taemin shouted into his radio, "The big one is bleeding atmosphere." It was not a major victory. The alien fleet still had hundreds of ships, but it was proof that Earth could fight back even in space. It gave people hope. On the ground, the fighting continued. Cities became battlefields. Forests became ambush zones. The ocean became a graveyard for alien submarines. And with each passing hour, the Vraltesh began to understand that this would not be an easy conquest. In Berlin, Ji Woo Quan used his knowledge of the city's architecture to create deadly ambushes. In New York, Hana Lim coordinated swarms of commercial drones that had been modified to carry explosives. In Mumbai and Cairo and Mexico City, humans fought with everything they had. The casualties were terrible on both sides. But there was one crucial difference. The humans expected to die. They had made peace with it. They fought anyway. The Vraltesh had expected an easy victory. Every death, every setback, every unexpected resistance chipped away at their confidence. Thexler stood in his command center, staring at the tactical displays with growing dread. His fleet had lost 12 ships. Thousands of his soldiers were dead or wounded. The conquest was supposed to have been completed by now. Instead, they were bogged down in brutal urban warfare across a dozen cities. "Perhaps we should withdraw and bombard the planet from orbit," his second-in-command suggested quietly. "Destroy their cities and infrastructure. Force them to surrender." Thexler considered it. The Empire had never done such a thing before. They conquered worlds to use them, not to destroy them, but these humans were different. They refused to follow the script. They refused to surrender. "Not yet," he said finally. "We will break them. We must break them. The Empire does not retreat." But in his hearts, plural because Vraltesh had two, doubt was growing. These primitives were supposed to be easy prey. The stars above Earth flickered as 300 warships emerged from the darkness of space. They were massive, each one the size of a small city, their hulls gleaming with strange metals that seemed to drink in the light. Commander Thexler stood on the bridge of his flagship, his four eyes scanning the blue and green planet below with cold satisfaction. This would be conquest number 848, another primitive world to add to the Vraltesh Empire. Thexalor had seen this scenario play out hundreds of times before. The species on these planets always reacted the same way. First came the fear, then the desperate attempts at communication. Finally, the surrender. It usually took less than a week. He expected nothing different from this world the natives called Earth. In Seoul, South Korea, Dr. Ji-won Kim was the first to notice the anomaly. She had been working the night shift at the United Earth Defense Council's monitoring station when every sensor in the facility suddenly screamed to life. The screens filled with data, showing massive objects entering Earth's orbit. Her coffee cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor, but she barely noticed. "Get me the director," she said into her communications device, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. "We have visitors." Within minutes, the alert spread across the globe. Military bases went on high alert. Politicians were dragged from their beds. News channels interrupted their regular programming with breaking news bulletins. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was terrifying. Captain Minho Park received the emergency call while training with his Special Forces unit in the mountains. He gathered his team immediately, his jaw set in a grim line. Minho had spent 20 years preparing for every possible threat to his country, but alien invasion had never been on the list. Still, a threat was a threat, and he would face it the same way he faced everything else, with determination and careful planning. The aliens sent their first message 12 hours after their arrival. It was broadcast simultaneously in every major language on Earth, translated by technology so advanced it understood even regional dialects. The message was simple and brutal. "You are the inhabitants of planet designation 749. The Vreltesh Empire claims this world. You have 72 hours to surrender all military forces and submit to our authority. Resistance will result in extinction. This is your only warning." At the United Nations building in New York, chaos erupted. Yoonji Choi, a young diplomat from South Korea, watched as representatives from every nation shouted over each other. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for military action. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Yoonji had always believed in the power of words, in negotiation and peaceful resolution. But as she listened to the alien message replay over and over, she felt that belief begin to crack. "We need to try to communicate with them," she said, raising her voice above the din. "We should at least attempt to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" snapped a general from across the room. "They gave us an ultimatum, not an invitation to talk." Daewon Lee worked in a cramped office in the intelligence division, surrounded by computers and translation software. While diplomats argued and generals prepared for war, he did what he did best. He gathered information. The alien message had contained more than just words. Hidden in the transmission were data packets, fragments of their language, pieces of their culture. For 3 days straight, Daewon barely slept. He analyzed every bit of data, building a picture of who these invaders were. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The Vreltesh had conquered 847 worlds before Earth. They had faced species with advanced technology, species with powerful weapons, species with strong military traditions. Every single one had fallen. But something else troubled him even more. As he dug deeper into their databases, he found something strange. The Vreltesh had never encountered a planet quite like Earth. Their scientists had flagged it as unusual. The biodiversity was extreme. The weather patterns were violent. The species that lived here were remarkably aggressive compared to other worlds. Ji-won made the same discovery from a different angle. She had been analyzing the biological scans the aliens had taken of Earth. The Vreltesh came from a world with gentle seasons, predictable weather, and relatively peaceful evolution. They had never faced the kind of evolutionary pressure that Earth imposed on its species. Their homeworld had no ice ages, no mass extinctions, no periods where only the absolute strongest survived. "They don't understand what kind of world this is," she muttered to herself, staring at the data. "They think we're just another easy target." On the alien flagship, Thexalor was growing impatient. The 72 hours were passing, and the humans had not responded with a formal surrender. Instead, they seemed to be preparing for resistance. He found it almost amusing. Every species thought they could fight back at first. They always learned better. "Deploy the compliance teams," he ordered. "Show them what happens to those who resist the Empire." Minho was coordinating with military units around the world when the alert came through. Alien dropships were descending toward major cities: Tokyo, New York, London, Moscow, São Paulo, and Seoul. He grabbed his gear and headed for the transport vehicle, his team moving with practiced efficiency behind him. "Remember your training," he told them as they loaded into the aircraft. "We don't know what we're facing, but we know how to fight. Stay smart, stay together, and make every shot count." Across the city, normal people went about their lives, unaware that in minutes, their world would change forever. Yuna Han, a journalist who had embedded herself with the Japanese self-defense forces, had her camera ready. If humanity was about to face its darkest hour, she would make sure it was recorded. The alien dropships were smooth and silent, descending like metal tears from the sky. They landed in the heart of Seoul's business district, their doors opening with a hiss of pressurized air. 500 Vreltesh shock troops emerged, their armor gleaming, their weapons charged and ready. They expected screaming. They expected crowds of terrified civilians running in panic. They expected an easy show of force that would break the humans' will to resist. What they got instead was silence. The streets had been evacuated. Buildings stood empty. And from the windows and rooftops, thousands of gun barrels pointed down at them. Minho spoke into his radio, his voice calm and cold. "All units. These invaders have conquered 847 worlds. They think we'll be number 848. Let's show them why that was a mistake. Fire." The sound of gunfire echoed through the streets of Seoul like thunder. The war for Earth had begun. Thexler watched the reports coming in from the surface with growing confusion. The humans were fighting back. Not just fighting, but fighting effectively. His troops, elite soldiers who had crushed resistance on 100 worlds, were taking casualties. "Actual casualties. This is impossible," he said, staring at the tactical display. "They're primitives. Their weapons are centuries behind ours." But his second-in-command looked worried. "Commander, perhaps we underestimated them. This world is marked as highly dangerous in our surveys. The biodiversity readings are extreme." Thexler dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "Dangerous animals mean nothing to our technology. Send reinforcements. We'll crush this resistance within the day." But deep in his mind, a small seed of doubt had been planted. For the first time in his long career of conquest, something felt wrong. These humans were different somehow. They fought with a desperation he had never seen before, but also with a strange confidence, as if they had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. In her office at the United Nations, Yoonji watched the news feeds from Seoul with tears in her eyes. Her city was burning, but it was also fighting. She thought about the message she had prepared, the peaceful words she had wanted to send to the aliens. Now those words seemed naive and foolish. Jiwon looked at the biological data one more time and realized something that filled her with both terror and hope. Humans had evolved on a death world. Every other species the Vreltesh had conquered came from gentler planets, easier environments. They had never faced anything like humanity before. The question was, would that be enough? As the first day of the war drew to a close, both sides counted their losses. The aliens had superior technology and numbers, but the humans had something else. They had home field advantage on a planet that had spent millions of years teaching its inhabitants how to survive against impossible odds. The next 72 hours would determine the fate of Earth, and the galaxy was watching.